Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a woman to society.
Then so shall you be. Hey, this is Lisa Landry. Welcome back to One Menace to Society. I have the privilege today of speaking with Susan Hughes in Sedona. Hello, Susan.
Hello, Lisa.
And you're with PFLAG. Now, what the heck is a PFLAG? Is that like P-Funk?
Not at all. PFLAG is an organization of parents, families, friends, allies, and members of the LGBTQ community. It's a national organization, and in fact, this year is celebrating its 45th anniversary. It was actually started by a woman named Jean Manafort, who had a gay son, and in 1972, she decided to march in the Christopher Street Liberation Day March, which has now morphed into the Pride Parade, in New York City with her son, Morty. And during that parade, people kept running up to her and asking her to speak with their parents. So in March of 73, she actually started a support group for parents.
And you started a group in Sedona.
I did.
And why did you start Sedona's PFLAG?
It is a long story.
We got time, Miss Hughes.
All right, well, here it goes. When my husband and I moved to Sedona, we were looking for a church home, and we found a church that had a associate pastor who was close to our age. One of the things we found when we moved to Sedona is that we were the youngsters, and we were in our 50s. So it was nice to find somebody that was kind of our age and our attitude, and he was a single father whose kids would come to visit on weekends. So during the week, we tried to do stuff with him because we just really enjoyed his company, and we kind of became very good friends. So one night I got a call from this man, and he said that he needed to share something with me before it was shared with the congregation of the church. And I knew he was going to tell me he was gay because I had assumed he was gay.
Was he trying to redo your living room and fix your hair?
No, there was just something about him. And I have a lot of gay friends, so I don't know, you just kind of know, you know?
Uh-huh.
And so he came out to my husband and I on the phone and told us that the church was going to be having a service, and the senior minister wanted him to come out. And for me, it was horrifying that this guy was going to have to stand up in front of a congregation and announce that he was gay. I don't know. I just felt so strongly for him that you know, I was nervous for him, if anything else. But it went amazing. He got a standing ovation, and the overwhelming amount of support in that room that day was so heartening. At the same time, I had been bothering the senior minister about starting what's called the open and affirming process within the denomination of that church, which was a United Church of Christ, UCC church. And he was very reluctant, and I was very adamant about pushing it because I happened to be in a Bible study with a lot of women who felt like we needed to be an open and affirming church, and somehow I got elected to be the one to push the agenda.
Because you were one of the younger ones?
Yeah, it's like, okay, I'll do it. So, you know, after that service, I went to the senior pastor and said, hey, look, if not now, when? I mean, you had a whole congregation stand up and support your associate pastor. Let's go for it. He was a reluctant player, but he agreed to start the process. And as we were starting this process, I think this would have been in like January, I get a call from my son who says he needs to come home and talk to his dad and I. And it was just kind of an odd call. And I said, is something wrong? No, nothing's wrong. I said, are you okay health-wise? I'm fine, but I need to fly home. Well, he had flown home for Christmas. So this is like 3 weeks later. And he lived in Manhattan at the time. And so of course my husband and I assumed the worst, that he had some, fatal disease, and he was coming home to tell us in person, and for the life of us we couldn't figure it out.
Well, especially Sedona. Sedona, I don't know if most folks recognize, it's pretty removed. I mean, it's not easy to
Mm-hmm.
get. I mean, maybe if you have a spacecraft, it's easy to access through the vortex, but it's not easy to get from Manhattan's airport or any of the regional airports in Manhattan all the way down to Phoenix to get to you. So I can imagine that you were kind of freaking out.
We were really freaking out, and you were right, because not only is it the long flight from Manhattan to Phoenix, but then it's a 2.5-hour drive from Phoenix to Sedona.
Right.
So yeah, it is. It's not an easy trip, and it's
Mm-mm.
not a trip you make lightly. Not a weekend destination from there. So we pick him up, drive home. This is on a Friday, and we're just bugging him nonstop about how he's feeling. How are you feeling? How are you feeling? And he's not saying he's fine. And in
Aw.
fact, he's getting annoyed because in his head he had his agenda, and in our hearts we had ours. We knew he was dying.
Aw.
So he finally, on Sunday morning, right before we were going to go to church, actually, he comes out into the kitchen and he says, I have to tell you guys something. I'm gay. And my husband likes to joke around. He just looked at him and he said, well, thank God, because we thought you were dying. We laughed, we cried, we hugged. And just later that day, I said to him, why was this so hard for you? And he looked at me and he said, I knew you and Dad would be okay with it, but I have watched so many of my friends being rejected by their families when they've come out that I just didn't want to take that risk. And that broke my heart, and also made me decide I needed to start a PFLAG chapter, because there had to be other kids out there in that exact situation. And if I could give them some kind of forum to be able to communicate with their parents easily, I just didn't want another kid to have to go through this, because, our son, it had been eating him up, because he wanted to share it with us, and yet he didn't know if he could. That's how I started a PFLAG chapter.
Well, I'm glad you started that, and I've seen a picture of your son, and he is very good looking. So I'm
Well,
glad
thank
I'm
you.
glad y'all didn't kick him out because he's hot. and and think about that, Susan. Like, you're dealing with a son who has two loving parents who are still together, and they're actually doing things like going to church as a couple and socializing with other people in the community. And so for him to have that fear with such a good parenting structure, I'm glad that you recognize so many children and young adults don't have that, and even grown adults don't have that sort of support. So thank you for stepping up.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we have a pretty large gay community in Sedona, and the other thing that PFLAG has been able to do is kind of give that community a forum. And we've had a number of folks share their coming out stories within our group, and the number of folks my age who have parents who will still not embrace them is just disheartening. It's very difficult for me to understand, because your child is your child. It shouldn't matter. And what I'm learning from a lot of these folks is that their parents are using religion as their rationale. And I don't understand that at all. And PFLAG is a non-secular organization, so religion doesn't really enter into the picture there. But yet it's a theme we hear over and over again at our meetings, and it's just very disheartening.
Well, it's really sad too when you consider that folks use that Leviticus passage, about
Yep.
man won't lay down with man and all. And I love God personally, and I do
Mm-hmm.
enjoy scripture. And I've never seen a passage where Jesus cured gay.
Yeah, or even mentioned gay.
Would
Or
and you would think, you would think that some parents brought their gay kids there to get cured. I mean, it would have happened if they're bringing lepers and children who are having all these other issues. You know that some dad brought his gay son trying to get a cure for him trying to, do his sister's nails and, you know, and you know that it didn't happen because if it had been cured, we'd have those passages to refer to.
Yep. I became a student of religion at one point because those phrases that get tossed out, like Leviticus, just bothered me to no end. And I wish the folks that hide behind that would actually read the entire Bible and study it and come to know it, because there's so much, especially in the Old Testament, that is so arcane and not applicable. And, so for people to glom onto a verse and decide that that's going to be their rationale for distancing themselves from their child, when, at the same time they're probably wearing polyester and eating shrimp.
For real.
It's like,
Yeah.
Can't pick and choose,
Yeah.
And if you're a Christian, all you got to do is follow Jesus, and he said to love everybody. That's it.
Right. That's kind of the main goal there. It's not about subjugation and judgment and picking and
Yeah,
choosing verses. Plus, the Levites were just uncool. Like, if you look at the 12 tribes, the Levites were kind of like the biggest asshats as far as
yeah,
structure and being fundamentalist and being very archaic, to use your term. We've thrown out a lot of those things
yeah.
they said were
We've
things we're
thrown
supposed
out
to do.
almost all of them.
Moses was pro-rape and he was a Levite himself. No disrespect, because he did accomplish quite a lot, but
Yep.
we're all human, we all fail. What are some things that you've heard younger folks say to you because you are such a bridge? Maybe somebody that you've helped in Sedona is disowned or not being heard by their own family right now.
I was thinking about that for a bit and trying to come up with some good examples. And what's interesting in Sedona, I think we live in an area where people are a lot more tolerant.
You're living in Burning Man with steroids, if you ask me.
Yeah, there we go.
I mean, I'm a fan. I love Sedona. I try to visit as often as I can. But yeah, you're super, super crunchy there.
Yeah, and we're a little haven of blue in a sea of red. It's just it's an interesting little community, and the kids that are out are very out, and their parents are very supportive. And yet there are some that won't come out, and I've talked to them because they know their parents will disown them, and it's just I feel like there's no way to reach those parents. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I did get involved with PFLAG, is I needed to get some tools so I could help those parents. But if the child doesn't want to come out to their parent, getting in that door is difficult, because I'm not going to out somebody's kid. I mean, ever. That
Right.
would just never happen. So I just remain there to listen. We have, at our monthly meetings, half the meeting is devoted to support, and it's facilitated by a licensed therapist, and she does an amazing job of just helping people find themselves. That's what I feel like we offer is, we might not be able to mend your relationship, but we can help you figure out who you are. And that's kind of what we all need.
Yeah, definitely. A little bit more affirming of one another.
Yep.
That would be a good thing, right? Cooperation.
It would. It's like, why is that so hard?
I don't, I struggle with that. Why is it so hard just to cooperate with each other?
If we could figure that out, we could solve a lot of problems, I think.
I watched you on To the Contrary, that PBS documentary, and
Oh, okay.
you were lovely on that. And in the story of your pastor coming out, your reverend, I guess, is that the term? It's an Episcopalian church. So,
No, it's a UCC church, so
okay.
it was a pastor.
Thank you. So the second pastor coming out that day, I guess, was preordained. And
Hmm.
and you were delightful in that interview, just giving your own journey of having that church recognized as an open and affirming congregation, and the story of this gentleman coming out and how that impacted everybody in attendance that day, and everybody was so accepting and tolerant and supportive. What are some things that you might have said in that interview if you were asked today? Because I know I've been interviewed and I've given answers, and then I look at where I am now and I think, oh, I wish I could have said this.
Right after I watched it, I had a whole list of things.
That's what always
And
happens. That's natural, you know?
and then I've gone back and watched it and said, well, they needed to keep it short. And there was a lot I did say that got cut out. I mean, I think I was interviewed for about an hour and a half.
Hmm.
I guess if I had to pick one thing, I probably would have gotten on my soapbox a little more in terms of asking parents to love their children. I felt like I was supporting a process that we went through, but not necessarily asking people to commit to anything or to, maybe examine their own lives and figure out how they could put our process into play in their own communities, because it's important. I feel like the term Christian has been co-opted and become so negative. And I would have liked to have seen that produce something a little more positive with respect to that term, that noun.
Like a call to
Yeah.
action. Yeah.
Call to action. Do this in your own church. I mean, you can do it. It was surprising after that segment came out. I did get a lot of calls from people who wanted to know what our process was and how we went about it. And I was happy to send them everything we had. We had a whole, as you saw in that video, it took us about 2 years from start to finish.
Wow.
And part of that was that the pastor was reluctant at the beginning, so he asked us to make it a very thoughtful process.
And that's fair, you know?
It was. It was fair. And the other thing he suggested is, poll the congregation and let's not just make this LGBT, let's make this whatever is bothering you. And I think that the most interesting thing that came out of that is we had people who were bothered by a disabled choir that comes and sings at Christmas time, because then the disabled children and adults would mingle at coffee hour and it made people uncomfortable.
Wow.
And I know. I was like, are you kidding me?
I would have no idea that would bother folks.
I wouldn't have either. And so we actually did a whole segment on that. We showed a film. We had speakers come in. There's a lovely facility just down the street from Sedona for disabled adults. The founder and director of that facility came and spoke. But yeah, you learn a lot about people when you kind of decide not to go in with preconceived notions. Because, if I had done it my way, I would have been a bull in a china shop going, you're going to love gay people. My God, you're going to love them. And we're done. But I was tempered, so that was good. And I learned a lot. It was such I think, a growth experience for the entire congregation. And I wish it would be continuing and, that other churches would pick this up.
Well, yeah, one of your congregants said, when I watched the video clip, she said, the world is a cruel place. I don't want my church to be cruel.
Right.
And that sums it up perfectly, doesn't it? I mean, you could say that about your mosque, your temple, your ashram, your meditation mat.
Yep.
Wherever you go to tune into source. I mean, that's what it's all about, listening to each other, hearing each other's complaints or discomforts and trying to pull each other up, right? I mean, if that's not what your church or your temple is about, why are you going?
Exactly. The good news is I was able to work with another church in Sedona who also went through their denomination's open and affirming process. And what you find out is it's the same set of questions. It's the same set of discussion points. And once you get there, people get it. The person you're referring to, I just love her. And she worked with us on the committee. And, all she would ever keep saying is, it's just about love. It's just about love. Why can't we get through everybody's head? It's just about love.
But that is what it is, right? Christ consciousness is all about love. Just, okay, you're acting like a dork, but I'm gonna give you a pass because we all act like dorks.
Absolutely. I got warts just like everybody else.
Exactly. Where do you think we're falling short of accepting one another? As somebody who has implemented this open and affirming process in your own congregation and helped another church implement this, where are we losing sight? Is it not loving each other?
I think that's what it boils down to, but I think that's driven by fear. I think for some reason we are fearful of the other. If you're not just like me, I'm afraid of you.
I'm suspicious.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like, really, why? I consider myself fortunate for having grown up in a family that was curious. And I never wanted to not know why. If I'm supposed to be fearful of that person, why am I supposed to be fearful? What are they doing that is going to harm me? And generally found out nothing. They're just like me. And I think if we could get rid of the fear, it would go a long way toward helping us love each other and accept each other.
I completely agree with you, Susan. I think some people too are very afraid of how they will be perceived within a community. I know that when my brother came out, it was the 90s. It was very early in the 90s. And my mother was extremely disheartened by how she would be perceived at church. She cried for days.
Wow.
Yeah, afraid that
And
she would
that,
lose her status, as a
and
mom.
that is something I've heard a lot, and also within the context of our meetings, is that, my friends won't like me anymore if I have a gay child. It's like, but then they aren't your friends.
Right. What did you lose?
And that's exactly what I want to ask is, you're going to lose that friend, but you are going to gain a whole different community that
Has better music.
Yeah, and Broadway shows. What else could you want? I think we get stuck. We get stuck in our own heads and are afraid to take risks, afraid to take chances. And I mean, life is about taking risk, and you can't stay in the same place. I can't.
No. Mm-mm.
I wouldn't want to.
No, you're wasting it.
Yeah, exactly. It's, we have a finite amount of time. So don't you want to, see and do and experience as much as you possibly can in this little bit of time we get to experience this life,
Yeah, get out there and love it.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to add? Because I think you're absolutely wonderful. And this is such a wonderful interview. And you're so deep, but so easy to access. And I would like to pose to anybody out there, if you're having trouble coming out to your parents, do what I did. Just show up with somebody of the same sex after you've been with horrible people of different genders.
What you did.
That's what I did. I rolled up to Florida with my girlfriend in tow, and we just didn't say anything and no questions were asked. It was just like, oh, she seems very sweet. We like her.
I love it.
So
Can I use that in one of our meetings?
please do. Please do. I do celebrate you. I think what you're doing is remarkable, and especially as somebody who is a woman of faith, I want to thank you because it is hurtful to want to have a better relationship with Creator and feel like you're unworthy because you have heard that you're unworthy as you sat in pews all these years as a youngster. So,
Yeah.
what you're doing is remarkable. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And what you are doing is remarkable.
I have my good days, Miss Hughes. What a sweetheart, Susan Hughes. Thank you so much. And thanks, y'all, for listening. Please do join me at lisalandry.com. You can sign up there for my newsletter. You'll get a free audio download. Also, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. That way, you'll know when new podcasts are dropping, as well as new comedy clips. Shout out, Ari. You know I wanted Vortex with you.